In this lesson, we'll apply what we've learned about context clues. We're going to listen to the story Henry P. Baloney. In Henry P. Baloney, there are several words that are used that are either made up or in another language that we won't be able to know right away. We'll use context clues, the picture clues, the words in the sentence, and the words on the page to help us figure out the meanings of the unknown words. Let's get started.
Baloney, Henry P. by John Sieska and Lane Smith. Last Tuesday morning at 8:37 a.m., Henry P. Baloney was finally late for class once too often. "That's it," said Miss Bug Scuffle. "Permanent lifelong detention unless you have one very good and very believable excuse." "Well, I would have been exactly on time," said Henry, "but I misplaced my trusty Zimulus. Then I, found it on my desky, but someone had put my desky in a Toruku. The Toruku drove me right here to Skazulo, but..."
All right, we've already been introduced to several words that are not familiar to me, so I'm guessing they're not familiar to you either. So let's start looking at these words and working to figure out the meaning. The first one, I misplaced my trusty Zimulus. When I look at the picture support and I think about kids at school, I know that kids lose their pencils quite often, and there are a lot of pencils in the picture. So I'm going to use the context clues and think that a Zimulus is a pencil. Let's continue. Then I found it on my desky. Pause the video. What do you think a desky is and why? I think a desky is a desk. I'm looking at the picture and I can see the Zimulus, pencil, on Henry's desk. Also, that's a pretty normal place for kids to find their pencils. Let's continue. Someone had put my desky in a Toraku. Pause the video. What do you think a Toraku is and why? What clues do you have to support your answer? I think a Toraku is a truck. It makes sense that a desk would fit in a truck, and I see these wheels that would allow it to move. A truck has wheels that allows it to move. Also, later in the story, it talks about the Toraku taking Henry to Zakola. It would make sense for a truck to take somebody to a place. So I think a Toraku is a truck. But speaking of Zakola, what do you think Zakola means? Pause the video. What do you think it means and why? I think a Zakola is the school. Henry's teacher is talking to him about being late to school again. And if somebody's trying to help him get to school on time, they might just put Henry with his pencil and his desk in a truck to try to get him to school on time. Let's continue the story.
Then it drove right past. I grabbed my Zimulus and jumped out, but I jumped smack in the middle of a Razzo launch pad.
All right, let's look at that story. A Razzo launch pad. What do you think Razzo launch pad could mean? I'm assuming that a Razzo launch pad is a rocket launch pad. I see a rocket in the picture, and that's a clue for me. Let's continue.
I used my Zimulus to pop open the escape porto, but it turned out to be a porto into the next Razzo blasting off.
Okay, there's that word razzo again, and I see another rocket. So I'm pretty sure that razzo does mean rocket. Let's continue.
I jammed the Razzo controls with my Zimulus so I could land behind the Scazola and still be on time, but I jammed the wrong Batuna and ended up on the planet Astros.
Let's think for just a minute. If he's jamming something and it causes it to go wrong, what do you think Batuna means? Pause the video. Henry continues to talk about all the things that he's doing to stop the rockets so he can get to school on time. So here where it says, I jammed the wrong Batuna, I know that there are a lot of buttons in a rocket, and I also know that the buttons control a rocket. So I'm assuming that Batuna is a rocket. Let's continue.
I entertained the Astro guys with my very funny Pixass, but they decided my Pixass and I would be entertaining to eat. I changed their minds with Guridams and Cuculations so fantastic they crowned me King Galas of the whole planet. But I forgot the Astronus word for thank you and accidentally used the word for doof brain.
All right, we've got some more words here. Let's take a minute and think about what do we think a cuculations is. Pause the video. What's your evidence? And why do you think that? What clues are in the text to help you figure that out? I think cuculations is another word for calculations. He's doing the math to try and figure out how to solve the problem. The other word that's unknown for me here is geodrams. And I notice in the illustration, there's a lot of diagrams, and the D and the G have just been reversed. So my context clues are helping me to think that geodrams are diagrams. Let's look at one more word before we continue. They crowned me Kuningas of the whole planet. Pause the video. What do you think Kuningas means? Use your context clues. I think Kuningas means king. I notice that now Henry wears a crown like a king wears, and the phrase is very familiar to being crowned a king. We don't say that you would be crowned a teacher, but we would say the phrase crowned a king. Let's continue the story.
I foiled their plan to disintegrate me by plugging their blassa with my Zimulus.
All right, let's look at this word blassa. Pause the video and think for yourself. He foiled the plan to disintegrate me by plugging their blassa, so it has to be something that you can plug. And he plugged it with his Zimulus, and on the very first page, we came up with the context clue that a Zimulus is a pencil. So what could you jam with a pencil that they would use to disintegrate Henry P. Baloney? Pause the video and think about it. I think a blassa is a ray gun. I see these pictures that look like ray guns. We're talking about space creatures that might use ray guns, and a ray gun comes to a point at the end, so it would be easy to jam it with a pencil. Let's keep going.
But they made a new plan to send me back in a sighing flosser. The fracas of Sokola. I erased the sighing flosser, fracas instructions, but...
All right, pause the video, take your time. What do you think a sighing flosser is? That's how they're going to send Henry back to his own planet. What do you think sighing flosser means? Use your picture context clues, use the word context clues, and then restart the video. I noticed here in the picture that this looks like a flying saucer. A flying saucer is something that aliens are known to use. So my context clues are telling me that the aliens, or the people who have Henry P. Baloney, are trying to send him back on a flying saucer. Let's keep listening to the story.
I also erased the sighing flosser Porto lock and fell out. I dropped like a urak. I was only 3 seconds away from Zeraplandazen, all over the spell plantus. Not even my trusty Zimulus could save me. So what did you do? Said Mus Bug Scuffle. How could you possibly save yourself? I suddenly remembered that falling bodies obey the law of gravity. And I haven't learned the law of gravity yet, so I stopped and came to Skazola. All of which made me exactly 7 minutes late this amoo. Henry P. Baloney, said Miss Bug Scuffle. That is an unbelievable. But today's assignment is to compose a tall tale, so why don't you sit down and start writing? I'd love to, said Henry, but...
All right, let's rewind that just a little bit so we can see the words. Here he talks about how he was late this Amu. What do you think Amu means? Go ahead and pause the video. I remember back at the beginning of the story where Henry P. Baloney's teacher talks about exactly how late he is to school this morning. So now that Henry is saying that he's exactly 7 minutes late this Amu, this morning is a very common phrase that people use all the time. And so I think Amu means morning. I also noticed earlier on the other page that it said that Henry stopped and came to Zakola. Earlier, we talked about how Zakola, using our context clues, probably means school. So in that context, it makes sense that he stopped the gravity and he came to school because now he's here having a conversation with Miss Bug Scuffle.
But I seem to have misplaced my Zimulus. Afterward, the transmission that was received directly from deep space, once the signals were decoded, it became clear that this was a story about a life form similar to many Earthlings. Even more amazing was the discovery that the story is written in a combination of many different Earth languages, including Latavan, Swahili, Finnish, Esperanto, Inuit, who knows why.
All right, let's look at some of these. Amu, here's our decoder, so our little answer guide. Amu is morning. Astrus is unlucky. Blassa was ray gun. Batuna was button. Calculations was, or calculations, sorry about that, is calculations. Desky was desk. Fracassus was shatter. These are getting small and hard for me to read. I can see down here, though, that we do have Zakola, which was school. Feel free to go back and listen to the story again and see if you can catch some of the words that we missed. Great job.